Okay, and then the second half of today is we're going to go through half of this, and then I will post the second half when I get the second half recorded, hopefully this afternoon, but every time I try to make a video in the afternoon, it ends up being nap time, and then I'm like yawning throughout the entire recording, of which you guys have pointed out to me before. So thank you for that, I guess. And I did, okay, yep, and I am recording. So we are starting to get into, okay, so we're starting to, like I said, get into the downward slide of our mock interview project, right? So last week we talked about chapter 7, which is how to be an interviewer and how to avoid, discrimination in interviewing and how to ask questions of people. So now we're going to do the second half of that, which is how to have a good employment interview if we are the ones who are job seeking. So before we get started with any of this, do you guys have any tips or tricks from job interviews that you guys have done? And on Zoom, you guys can feel free to talk up too if you have any thoughts. Nathan, did you raise your hand? Okay. What? No thoughts? Tips and tricks on how to have a good interview to get a job. Match their energy, that's a good one. But what if they're like really all just like, ugh. Yeah, if they don't seem very energetic or very happy to be there, then you might just not be getting that job. They just might be too tired to really give you the thought that you deserve. How should we dress? Yeah, dress nice. We want to dress for the part. I'm not going to show up in a 3-piece suit for an interview at a wellness center. I'm probably going to show up in khakis and maybe a polo, something that's nice but a little more casual. Not going to show up in a pencil skirt to an interview to work on a construction site. So dress appropriately for that specific job. Another kind of little tip, if the company you're applying for or the organization, if they have a specific color that they have, you can maybe wear that color to your interview. So if you're applying at EAC, maybe you wear something that is subtly purple. Or if you're putting on, a jacket over it, maybe you have a purple undershirt. If you're applying at ASU, maybe you wear a red and gold tie. Yeah, ASU is red and gold, right? Okay. So is U of A blue, red, and white? Blue and white, or? Blue, red, and white. So maybe if you're applying at U of A, you wear a white shirt with a blue and red tie. If people interview a lot of others, they might pick up on that, but most people, it kind of goes over their head. But they associate you with the institution if you're wearing those colors. So, pro sneaky communication tip, right? Okay. But before we apply for jobs, or as we're applying for jobs, we have to think about what kind of jobs do we want to apply for. I'm sure most of us have worked some odd jobs. We may have babysat, we may have mowed lawns. For me, I was a waitress. I've worked in a wellness center. I've been a lifeguard. And, for most of that time, or at least the most recently, I've been teaching. But what are my personality traits that make me good at this job, or that lead me to like this position? So as a teacher, I like to think that I'm pretty personable. I like to think that you guys feel free to come to me with questions or feel free to email me, that I'm not too intimidating. I don't make a good elementary or middle school teacher because I'm not intimidating. The kids won't listen to me because I'm too nice. So, if your personality trait's a little more strict and a little more authoritarian, maybe you do better teaching younger kids. Some of us don't. If you're going to go work at a bank or a casino, are you trustworthy enough to do that? Or do you tend to get tempted to want to take things? Or even, there are people who have kleptomania who literally cannot control the urge to take things. And they probably should know that about themselves so that they don't work in a position where they will be tempted to take things. What are your intellectual strengths and weaknesses? Or it could just be, what do you like more, or what have you practiced more versus what have you not? They're not going to hire me to be a math tutor because, yes, while I can do math, it is not my intellectual strength. I don't practice math a lot. They're not going to hire me to be the bodybuilding coach because they have Nate over there who's applying, and he's going to be the one who's a lot better at that. What are my communicative strengths and weaknesses? Maybe I work really good in a group, but maybe I work really, really well alone. But you have to know that about yourself. Because if they say, this position requires extreme leadership and teamwork skills, and if you know about yourself, I do not like working in a team, then maybe you would think, maybe I don't want to apply for this if it doesn't play to my strengths. Or if they offer it to me, maybe I shouldn't take it if I know this about myself, if you have other options. What are some of your accomplishments? What are your failures? What have you learned from your failures? Sometimes you'll get a job interview question where they say, tell me about a time that you failed. And that's an opportunity to say, yeah, here's a time where stuff went really wrong and I totally failed at that, but this is what I learned. This is what I know now because of that failure. So, and then your professional strengths and weaknesses, maybe you're really, really organized, or you're really good at Microsoft or Adobe products, or insert whatever here. Maybe you're not as great with technology. So just be aware of those things about yourself. You're not going to walk into a job interview and be like, hi, my name is Kylie and I hate to work with people. You're not going to advertise your weaknesses like that, but just be aware of them in yourself so that when you are job searching and when people ask you, you can find ways to answer that. Or if they say, okay, Brian, what are your weaknesses? People joke about saying, oh, well, I work too hard, or I'm a workaholic. And no, we're not going to answer our weaknesses with, oh, I'm a workaholic, because that's one of those advice that people give, and it's just like, please don't. Maybe your weakness is that you maybe aren't great with time management, but what are you doing to work on that? One of my weaknesses, I'm not great with time management, so I always make sure that I write out my schedule hour for hour so I know what I'm doing, or whatever your weakness happens to be. Just make sure you say how you balance it out. What do you do to combat that? You have to ask yourself, what do you want in a position? Personally, I want to work 9 months out of the year, which means I'm not ever going to be a bureaucrat because they work all year round, more than 40 hours a week. What kind of climate or culture do you want to work in at this organization? What type of people do you want to work with? Do you want to actually work with people, or do you want to work alone? So what needs do you value? Do you value intellectual stimulation where you're always thinking and always solving problems? Or do you value having more repetitive work where you don't have to think and can just do? That's honestly one thing I really liked about being a waitress, was that I didn't really have to think a lot. I could just do. It's really, really easy to be a pretty good waitress. You just go around, you talk to people, you make sure they have what they need, you take your slip back to the kitchen, you bring out food, and you do it all over again. What are your professional interests? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Is this job going to help you with that? Even if it's not the most 100% perfect position, that would, lead exactly straight to what you want? Is this a good stepping stone for it? Is it going to help you? And then, do you have a mature and realistic perception of your field and what goes on? So I've, because I've been in communication, I've talked to a lot of people who are like, oh, well, I think journalism sounds fun. But the thing is, do you really know what that entails? Can you deal with getting up at 3 o'clock in the morning because you got a text that the ambulance is down on such and such street because there's been a car wreck? Can you deal with getting out of bed, putting on your clothes and going out there to take those pictures, or getting there before the ambulance does and having some guy screaming his head off because he's lost part of his leg in a motorcycle accident? Do you understand that these are the things you're going to come up against? If you want to be a doctor, do you understand that sometimes you're going to have kids come in who are sick and you can't save them? If you're a teacher, do you understand that some of your kids are going to be sexually abused or their parents beat the crap out of them, and then you're the one that has to call CPS and deal with that? Do you know the challenges that you're going to face, or do you just have a super idealized view of this? I mean, that's not to say, you shouldn't pursue what you care about, but it's just saying, do you have a realistic view of what it's going to look like? Because there's downsides to every field. So, do your research. That's the big one. So if you have a career field or a job or organization that you want to go into, research it. Know what a typical day looks like at this particular organization. Know what a month looks like in this field. So if you want to go be a marine biologist, well, what kind? Do you want to be doing field research? Do you want to be in a lab? How do you figure out, which one you want to do? You have to research. Do you know who you're going to be talking to in the job interview? If you do, look them up. See what they're about. What do they know? What is their position? Do they have a very specific interview process that they go through? A lot of times nowadays, you can literally just Google a company or whatever and say, interview process for Apple or for Google. And people will post stories of their interview process with these companies. Obviously, you don't always find those because some companies are really small. But for bigger ones, multinationals, there's probably people who are talking about it. Research current events, know what's going on. If you went to school for petroleum engineering, know what's going on in the world in regards to your field, in regards to petroleum. If BP just had a huge oil spill, might not be the best time to go work for BP because they're about to shell out a lot of money to people because they have to pay to clean that up. One of the most efficient ways to, get research and to figure out about this organization or this position is to network. And that requires talking to people, right? You can network through websites like LinkedIn. I'm sure Facebook will come out at some point with like Facebook job search because they already have Facebook dating. So what's next? There's Monster, which is a job search site. You can look at newsletters for specific companies because if Apple has job openings, I'm sure Apple has their own newsletter that they put out, stuff like that. Career centers and employment agencies. Here in town, we have Arizona at Work down by the movie theater. You can go down there and talk to the people there. They have a job board up that you can, take that job position opening and work on your resume and cover letter over there, and they will help you. You can go to job fairs. I think sometimes EAC has a job fair. I feel like it's normally in the spring, but I don't think we had one last year. I mean, for obvious reasons. But a lot of bigger universities and stuff have huge job fairs. And they're always kind of fun to go to and just talk with people. And then people see your face, they know your name. So when they get your application, they're like, oh yeah, I talked to Maddie at the job fair at ASU. Okay, that makes sense. Nobody knocks on doors anymore. Like, honestly, like, no one's probably gotten a job by walking up to a business and knocking on the door and talking to people in a long time. It definitely still does happen, but not very often. So most of the time they want you to put in an online application rather than just, walking in and talking to them. So far, is this stuff making sense? So, before you go into, accepting a job, you have to do your research. You have to know, what this daily work is going to look like. Are you going to be pushing a lot of paper when you really want to be out in the field? So when you are in the interview, and especially when you're doing like your resume and cover letter, how are you presenting yourself so that you are the one that gets the job and not someone else who wants it? Well, I don't like the turn of phrase that I'm about to use, but it's really the best turn of phrase for it. You really do have to sell yourself if you want the job. And some people do that really naturally. They're just really personable. They're really easy to talk to. They ask good questions. Some of us have to try a little bit harder. But, in your application, your resume stuff, you do this. You brand yourself. You emphasize what you have going for you. Maybe it's your education. Maybe you're highly educated, and that's what you put at the top. Maybe you have a lot of experience. Maybe, you have, 10 years working with people with special needs, and that's exactly what they're looking for. So that's how you brand yourself. It's like, look, I have this. This is exactly what you want, and this is why. So what sets you apart? So like I said, you can do this in your resume, you can do it in your cover letter, but just make sure you do it somewhere. We've already talked about resumes and cover letters last week. Briefly, because I know people had questions about that. But just your resume, it's just a super brief overview of you. So what are your experiences in education and other qualifications that make you right for these positions? So you always have to have your contact information up at the top. So we say, Maddie Underwood, 928, blah, 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 blah. And then an email. You don't have to put your address on it. A lot of people do, but you don't have to. Because if I'm applying for a job in Milwaukee and they see, oh, she lives in Arizona, then that might lead them to think, well, why don't we just get someone local? So if you just put your phone number, most of us probably have kept the same phone number since high school. So you might have a 928, you might have a 620 or a 602 or, whatever, insert here. But yeah, you don't have to put your address. If they offer you the job, you might have to give it to them in case they want to send you something physical, but, and then typically the next one people put right below that is education and training. Remember, we start with the most recent first, and then we go reverse chronologically. However, you can put your experience first if you have more experience than education. It depends on what the position is and which one you personally have more of. If you have more experience, like if you have 10 years working with students with special needs, then you'd probably put that first, especially if you don't have a master's degree in special education. You'd put the experience and then your education. Any activities that you may be relevant, like if you're a member of Phi Theta Kappa, if you're part of this club on campus or that club, and any volunteer experience. Was this the class that I told? It was the Wednesday class I told about this. So you should use all of the volunteer experience at your disposal. However, religion is a protected class with EEO, with your equal opportunity employment. So if you serve, let's say, a mission, you don't have to specify which church. I would in fact not specify which church. So you could just say, you know, I served a 18-month or a 2-year volunteer mission in which I did these kinds of things. So. But these two are basically the same because all of your resume has to be in reverse chronological. But you can also play with the format of which thing goes at the top. For your resumes, honesty is always the best policy. Do not lie on your resume. If you do not have a qualification, do not put it on there. If you are in the process of getting one, then that's totally okay. So like if you're in the process of getting your associate's degree, yes, put that on there and just say expected graduation date, May of 2021 or May of 2022 or December, whatever. But don't lie. Please proofread. I have definitely misspelled my name on resumes before. So just double check everything, especially if you have a weird name. So. Here's an example of a chronological. So his education is at the top because he's doing it presently. So it's still in process. This one also still in process. But then obviously, like I said, he goes reverse chronologically through there. All of it will be reverse chronologically, at least for us. This one, he doesn't list dates or I guess she doesn't list dates because it's more of a functional, but I would still possibly put dates. The chronological is the standard. It's nice to have dates on it so we can see how long people have been at stuff. Because if you're job hopping every 4 months, then that's not really a good sign to recruiters, especially if you're, you know, closer to my age or above. If you're just out of high school or still in college and you have a couple short different jobs, that's one thing. But if when you get to be my age and over and you have new jobs every 6 months, then you'd probably want to use a functional, but most of the time just do chronological. So what they mean here by the mechanic is that it must be easy to review. So it needs to be short and to the point. You should not be turning in a 3-page resume. Heck, you should probably not even be turning in a 2-page resume. It should be a page to a page and a half. And it just needs to be really scannable. So we have to be able to see, okay, experience, boom. Okay, education, boom. Activities, okay, great, perfect. We got the basic information that we need from this person. Same with this one. Okay, this is the type of experience they have. They've consulted, counseled, coordinated, conducted, and they can write. Are any of you guys in like art or anything like that? Photography, graphic design, modeling? Okay. If you are in something like that, you'll probably have to turn in a portfolio as well. So if I'm applying for a job as a photographer, I'm going to go to, I'm going to send them my portfolio website so that, whoop, where did that go? Well then, I'm going to send them to my portfolio website so they can see my photography. But I teach, so this is not as important to me as a teacher. If I'm just applying for, you know, a part-time job or whatever, I'm not probably going to send them my photo portfolio because it's not relevant. So. Okay, let's get back to here. Oop, there we are. Yeah, it's like I think Asia left because I think she got this on Wednesday. But you should have your cover letter And we talked about that. I think it was last Wednesday. I honestly have no idea what we did on Monday. I think I was here, but who knows? But your cover letter will target specifically what the requirements are for this job. So you should address each specific qualification as it comes up. So here is an example cover letter that you guys are free to, pull up in the video later and watch. You guys also have access to all the slides and stuff. But they address all of the, if they had a job description, you could just go through and address all of the required and preferred qualifications in your cover letter and say, this is how I meet all of these qualifications. Yeah, we're not going to be able to finish all of this, so we're 14 slides in, we're halfway through. There is a resume and cover letter video here under the, thank you, under the modules, I believe. It's somewhere in here. I mean, I know it's in the modules, but I just can't remember which module that it is in. It might be, I'm not sure. It's somewhere. I think it's probably in chapter 7. Yeah, I think it's somewhere in this module 3. But I will go through and I will record the second half of this, hopefully tonight. We'll see how that goes, for you guys to finish watching about just dress appearance, nonverbals, how to answer questions. So get into some of the important stuff. And did you guys have any ending questions? I know I went through some of that pretty quickly. But some of it I've talked about it in other videos and stuff. So questions, comments, concerns? All right, well,